next question. Authors have all kinds of stories, and you mostly write historical fiction. I love this thing that you wrote under that. That's why it's called historical fiction. Yeah. Talk a little bit about Seafood Capital and talk about your interest in historical fiction.
Okay, so the seafood capital of the world is actually a nickname that my hometown, Biloxi, Mississippi, earned.
Okay.
And back in like 1905, it just exploded with the amount of seafood that they were canning and processing and sending out to the world. And they
Hmm.
were known as the seafood capital of the world for several decades.
Okay.
And a lot of times people will write a historical fiction story to either tell of a particular event or to tell their spin or their take on things. And I had actually stumbled across an article. It was like, oh, this happened back in 1922, and it was this fascinating story about some ships that were rum running ships, and
Okay.
just weird things that went on, and the interactions that everybody
Nothing to
could
do with
remember.
fish.
It had nothing to do really with fish, but it just
Okay.
the interactions that went on. It made for this, interesting. How does this tie to that? How does that tie to this? And it was just an interesting plot. It was actually described as something that would make Hollywood water, because of the way that went. So
Right.
I started trying to put together what I thought could have happened,
Hmm.
and this was really the first long story that I tried to write. And I
Mm.
made a lot of mistakes because I'd write two or three chapters and then I'd go back and read them and I'd start over. And then I'd write more and then I'd start over. And
We
then
all do
I
that.
did it about 5 times when I finally said, that's it. I'm taking it from here and I'm going to keep going. So I started writing by hand, and then I had a typewriter, electric typewriter.
Interesting.
The typewriter ribbon stopped advancing. So I put in a sheet of carbon paper and I would
Oh,
type and it would
oh,
actually come
using the
out.
carbon.
Then
There's an
I
engineer for you.
transferred it to an IBM. I had an IBM PC and
Uh-huh.
Microsoft Works. So I transferred it to that. And then Works went away and we got Word. So I transferred it into Word. And
Okay.
then in 2013, I got my first MacBook specifically so that I could put Scrivener on it.
Just
So
so
I
you can be
transferred
more like crazy in your head.
Word
Yeah.
into Scrivener. So it went, from every different kind of media that I could possibly write in. And it took me 33 years before I finally finished the
That's
story
that's why you like historical fiction, because it took
because
so damn long.
it's old enough I could talk about the beginning of the book that's historical fiction.
I love it. No,
But
I
one of the
always
other
wondered. Let me ask
things
you a
that was
question.
so great.
No, let me ask you another question though about historical fiction, because I always thought that historical fiction, this has got to be people that are like obsessed with something in history that they feel has not been told in a way that people are paying attention to it. Do you know what I mean? And
I
is
do.
that
And
anything with what this is?
for the seafood capital of the world, it was
Mm,
just, to me, it was interesting, it was fascinating. And then when I finished the writing, I was living in Germany.
mm.
And I'm a fifth generation Biloxian. I've always called that place home. I moved away in 1989, but it's still home.
It's still home, yeah.
As I was writing the story, it was me reliving being on the coast.
Wow.
And my
Okay.
descriptions and my feels as I was typing, it comes out in the writing, and it made me feel comfortable and tweaked me for feeling like I was at home. So it was really personally cathartic, I guess. Now,
That's neat.
what you mentioned about the historical fiction, the other one, which I just finished last month, I
Mm,
finished it's at the end of April. I finished just one more,
okay.
which is a story of I call it after the suicide but before the surrender, because
Okay.
it is something that happened, and it's probably one of the last major battles in the
Mm,
European theater of World War II.
okay.
And a German major, he was in the Wehrmacht here, went across the lines and got an American lieutenant and said, "Hey, come help me defend this castle full of these former French prisoners,"
Hmm.
because the SS that were guarding them all left,
So
and
you
there was
found this story somewhere? This is a true story.
absolutely it's a true story, and the Waffen SS were still running around shooting people that were not being loyal to the Reich.
Right.
So this Wehrmacht major goes and finds this American captain and says, "Help me defend these French prisoners." So he brings his Sherman tank over to this castle in Austria,
Hmm.
and it's one of the few joint German-American defenses against the Waffen SS, and it's the only time that the U.S. military has defended a medieval castle.
Wow, that's
And
fascinating. Wow.
I stumbled across it, and it was a fascinating story.
Yeah.
And again, I got to start digging into different aspects of it. And the Wehrmacht major, he was originally from Bavaria, but he had moved to Ludwigsburg, which is just north of
Mm.
Stuttgart, where I'm
Mhm.
currently living. So
Okay.
I was able to
Here.
go up, and there's a museum that's a little bitty
Wow.
tiny 4-room museum,
Yeah.
and they had this book that was some of his old diary pages and things like that.
Wow.
Actually,
Cool.
I just missed his son was there. I missed him by like 2 hours.
Hmm.
Of course, his son was very small when uh, all of this had
Young.
happened. Yes, I mean he was
Not
like,
not a small guy.
well, yeah, yeah, that
I
too. But
mean,
he was 2 or 3 when all of this stuff
yeah,
happened in
okay.
19.
I was thinking he's a
Uh,
really short little guy. Okay.
but
Um,
we get to meet him. I was this close to meeting him, but
yeah. Wow. Yeah.
anyway, so that's
Interesting.
really a very
That
unknown event that happened that I found fascinating. And again, I was able to write it and enjoy bringing out some of those aspects. And this one, so like Seafood Capital of the World took me 33 years to write.
mm,
Okay. The Island War took me 25 years to write. I basically started telling Just One More for our Deceit volume.
right.
And then,
It's our next book, folks.
well, no, it's our last book was
Oh, it's our
Deceit.
last book. Our next
Fate,
book's Fate. Oh my
right?
gosh.
The story that I had in Deceit was the beginning of this story. And
Right.
then about December, I started taking off. So between December and April, it went from about a 4,000 word story to a 71,000 word story. And
Yeah,
now
because
I'm trying to figure out which
you
part.
have read a short version. That's right.
I'm trying to pull out which part's going to be turned into Fate now. So
Okay.
the story in Fate, so it'll bookend Just One More, and it's in there.
Okay. And you can see what it's, well, that's sort of like our last question is to talk a little bit about this group that we've got, Transcendent Authors. And, we are like proud that we're publishing all kinds of jazz mixed together in one fantastic anthology so that it serves anybody's purpose, whether you're sitting on a beach or you're stuck in traffic. You can read one of our stories, right?
Right.
So what are you doing in Transcendent Authors? Let's see. What my idea was here is that I was thinking about that, how do you fit in well, we need somebody that writes historical fiction, but what happens if you come up with something else? I don't know.
Well, I think over the course of time, because I've been in the group since we were originally founded back
You
in
were in
2020.
Tolerance, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I was in Tolerance and then all of the seasons. And it's been a fun ride because we really did kind of have different subjects and different genres. And ultimately, we kind of sat down and said, we really need to figure out what is it that we're writing. And that's
We're
what
trying.
we're really writing literary fiction. So
Mm,
some of it is literary fiction that may be romance or paranormal or historical, but it
mm,
all is literary fiction because we are telling of the inner struggles of our main characters in our stories. And one of the things that I love about our group, and really just as being a writer, is in almost any other profession that you have, you strive to be the best. And a lot of times people try to be the best by putting down or stepping on other people,
mm,
because if you're the best doctor, that means, you got to knock off number two to be number one. But
mm.
as authors, it's just like an inherent desire to make each other better. So I'll read
Yeah,
that story and
great.
I'll say, hey, this is great, but if you change this word or rearrange this phrase, I think it hits a little better.
Mm,
And that creative energy that we have and the feedback as it goes back and forth in a developmental editing sort of a manner, it really turns into a passion
mm,
because I don't care if my story is better than yours. What I cared about is that both of our stories are good
mm.
enough to be in a book.
Well,
Because if
that's
I if I write a Faulkner-esque or a Hemingway-esque piece and
mm,
it's sitting next to something that looks like a 6-year-old did it, you know, people aren't going to want to buy that book
doesn't
to
work.
pick
Yeah,
it up
doesn't work.
and read one story while they're sitting in traffic or while they happen to be in the bathroom. They want all of the stories to be engaging and entertaining. And I think that's what our group does together.
That's what we
We,
help each other with. Absolutely. Well, I think that's a great way to end this wonderful interview. And thank you, Jonathan, for talking to us from Germany. And
well,
we look forward to you publishing some of these books. You got to let us know. Keep us up to date.
I